Now, it's been a rocky start for the new government. For example, technically, we've had 3 ministers for agriculture in 3 weeks. And last week, Sinn Féin appointed Monaghan rookie TD, Matt Carthy, as its front bench spokesperson on agriculture. And Matt joins me in studio. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Damien. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you were a shoe-in for the front bench. But I know you'd probably say, oh no, I didn't know. But you were a shoe-in. But was agriculture what you wanted?
Yes, and to be quite honest, I had spoken to Mary Lou MacDonald very early on in this term, and we both agreed that agriculture and the interests of family farms would be a priority for our party. And it's an area you wouldn't have had traditionally a lot of support from. I mean, Sinn Féin's core base would be urban working class, maybe more so than farmers. Absolutely, and farmers are creatures of habit. I remember saying this to a lot of them during the general election, and in most instances that's very good, because farmers' habits are what have maintained our rural traditions and our cultures. But one of the habits that they needed to break was to stop voting for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and a lot of them did, and a lot of them entrusted Sinn Féin with their vote for the first time in February. There's an awful lot more that we want to win over. We want to ensure that we earn the trust of those people who gave us a chance in February, but we've a big job of work to do to build support among that community.
And what about your own background, Matt? Are you from a farming background or any connections at all?
No, both my parents would have grew up in farms, but no, I wouldn't have a farming background at all. But I come from a small town in County Monaghan that wouldn't survive were it not for the network of family farms around it. They're the nearest thing that many towns and villages have to an industry. So one of the things that I used to articulate all the time in Brussels when I was an MEP was that we need to move the interests in farming outside of the farming community exclusively. We need people who have interest in the local pub, the local shop, the local GAA club, everything that happens within rural communities. And I mean that in the broadest possible extent, including regional towns that might be considered fairly big, like Monaghan Town or Cartmacross.
But do you find it's a bit of a disadvantage that you don't have that farming background or ag science background? Because it is a very technical area, as you will well know. Do you find that that'll be a bit of a disadvantage for you when you're trying to man-mark the minister on some technical issues to do with payments and rules and all of that?
Yeah, I haven't found it to be a disadvantage, because if somebody's involved in farming, generally they're involved in one particular aspect of farming. So a sheep farmer would know very little in relation to the dairy sector. So sometimes it's easier when you're a step removed entirely that you can take a holistic view. And I have to say I'm very fortunate, and I think anybody who's ever had the brief of agriculture spokesperson will be very fortunate, because Irish farmers aren't slow to let you know what their issues are and how particular schemes or regulations impact on their lives.
You said there, of course, you were an MEP. I called you a rookie TD, but you've been around a while now, Monaghan County Council, then an MEP, and you were on the Ag Committee in the European Parliament. Would you agree, Matt, that the Irish farming and farm policy, a lot of it is dictated in Brussels, not Kildare Street?
Oh, absolutely. The budget, predominantly comes from the European Union. So for good and bad, most of the policies and regulations that impact on the work that farmers do, most of their market access, all of the parameters that dictate what happens with the Irish agri-food sector, is decided.
So the Minister for Agriculture is he really the civil servant on behalf of the EU Commission?
No, because
in implementing policies.
The Minister for Agriculture actually has a big say in those European regulations, and within the framework of the new cap that's coming down, there is going to be huge flexibilities that will allow the Irish government to create bespoke solutions to Irish issues. And one of the critiques that we would have is in terms of European policy, because some European policy as it relates to farming isn't good from as far as I would see it, but it has actually been Irish governments that have been the people who have been pressing for those negative aspects. So as you know, I've had a huge issue pertaining to the distribution of CAP funds here in Ireland. The biggest resistance to a fair distribution has actually been the Irish government.
OK, but we might get onto that in a moment if time allows us. But just back to the Minister for Agriculture, do you find that now your job will be to work with him or against him?
Both. And I hope that in the first instance, I will be a constructive opposition spokesperson. The interests of me and the interests of the Minister for Agriculture should be the same. It should be to ensure the sustainability of our family farm network and to ensure that we continue to promote and protect Irish food product. So when the Minister is doing things that I think are in that spirit, then I will absolutely support him, and I won't be one of those people who will just oppose things for the sake of it. But if the Minister and the government are doing things or continuing with the policies that I feel are detrimental to rural communities and family farms, then I'll hold them to account, absolutely. OK,
you talked there about the redistribution of the CAP, and you're fighting the fight there of the so-called small man. But when you stand back and look at it, Matt, and you're not the only politician who has spoken like this in recent years, but the Common Agricultural Policy, it's about almost €2 billion every year flows into farms around Ireland. But a lot of like 99% of Irish farms are family farms. They're small. There aren't these massive big ranches. There will be some that are getting a lot of money, but it's not an awful lot. And the people that you're looking to take from in some cases are ones that have invested, young farmers that might have borrowed a lot of money based on what they're getting in CAP, that you want to actually maybe take back and give to more small part-timers?
Well, I look at this from the premise, as you say, about €1.8 billion of CAP funds are spent in Ireland every year. So we need to take a cold and hard judgment as to whether that money is being well spent. There are fewer farmers every single year, so that's an awful lot of money, and on that basis you have to say that it's not working. I think the premise I have as approaching what we require in terms of Irish farming, I call it the 3 Fs. The farmers need fair prices. Above all, that's the number one thing that we need to achieve. And some of those aspects are outside of our control because of the dominance of processors and retailers, but we need to strive towards that. We need to have fair play. The Department of Agriculture needs to see farmers as partners as opposed to enemies. But the third thing absolutely has to be a fair cap. And to me, it is morally indefensible to have a situation where most of the farmers that I represent are fearful as to whether or not they'll still be on the land in 4 or 5 years.
That's been going on since God was a boy.
Absolutely, but at the same time,
I could get you an IFA press release from 25 years ago, and it's a carbon copy of today about the future of farmers, etc.
There are a very small cohort, and I agree with you that it's small in number.
Yeah.
But they're drawing down hundreds of thousands of euros in CAP funds while most farmers are struggling to survive. And as I say, to me, that's morally indefensible, and it makes no economic sense, and it certainly doesn't serve the interest of the Irish family farm, as you say. So if we're going to keep repeating the line that we need to do more to protect and save the Irish family farm, well, then we need to recognise that something needs to change.
Well, what is your view in relation to climate action, imposing climate action while protecting the incomes of those small farmers harmoniously? That is a huge challenge. For example, do we need to reduce the amount of cattle in this country?
I think we need to move the focus of this debate from simply talking about the numbers of cattle being produced. So in terms of
that's a big issue for environmentalists. It's a red liner.
And what I would say to environmentalists, let's look at beef consumption, and I mean internationally. So if we look at it from that parameters, and I'm not one of those people that would tell people to eat less beef, because I'm not a hypocrite. I eat a lot of beef myself. Mm-hmm. But if we're saying to people who eat beef, you should eat the most sustainably produced beef in the world, well, then we'd be encouraging them to eat Irish beef. Instead, what we have is a situation where we're having this constant debate about the numbers of cattle that are grazing the land in Ireland, while at the same time the European Commission is, with the support of the Irish government, negotiating trade deals that'll see beef imports coming from places
there's
like
quid pro quo in any
Brazil.
trade deal, as you know.
But let's stop with the hypocrisy. So you cannot say, in the one hand, that we need to reduce the number of suckler farmers in counties like Monaghan or Donegal or Galway, but at the same time we're going to actually allow mass-produced beef that's the most unsustainable in the world to be imported into the same markets that we're serving.
And there's a lot of soya coming in from GM soy as well, coming in from South America to feed the cattle in this country on farms who are complaining about beef coming in from Brazil.
I'm never going to be convinced that it's a good idea to import beef from the far end of the world when we're actually producing the most sustainable product here in this country. And the other other thing that we need to recognise is that there are different types of beef production. So almost 20% of the beef that's actually being produced in this country right now is coming from factory feedlots. That can't be compared to the suckler farmer who is actually operating at a loss, yet it's his image, the farmer on the field with the cow and her calf, that's what's actually selling Irish beef.
Right.
So it needs to get it needs to get a premium price for their premium product as well.
Okay, I have a minute left and I have two questions. The first one is a yes, no, and do you support the ban on live exports?
No.
Okay, and the last one is, do you have sympathy for Eamon Ryan this morning?
Because he fell asleep in the door. I think Eamon Ryan has more important things to answer for. He woke up in the Dáil to vote against.
I know, but I mean, you're a politician at a
people...
personal level. He's getting a lot of abuse from your supporters with the hashtag not my Taoiseach that they were going around with a while ago. Now they have their ire on Eamon Ryan. You're a politician, you work hard as well. Do you have sympathy at a personal level? You know, because he's in the middle of obviously forming a government and now a leadership campaign.
Well, as I say, him dozing off in the convention centre wouldn't be my greatest concern with regard to Eamon Ryan. The fact that he's actually, after bringing in another Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael government that is operating on the basis of a programme.
But at a personal level, do you have sympathy
damage.
for the people complaining about him nodding off for a minute?
I really don't consider it to be on the top 100 things I care about right now. I'm more concerned about what this government is actually enacting in relation to policies, as opposed to the number of hours that Eamon Ryan is getting sleep each night.
All right, okay. Anyway, I'll leave it there at that. You were up early this morning, so make sure you keep the eyes open and on the road now, heading back to Carrickmacross. Thanks very much for joining us, and the best of luck in your role in the Dáil as the front bench spokesperson on agriculture.